Charles, and thank you to CSFN for having me tonight, and want to acknowledge my colleague, Supervisor Matt Dorsey, who is also on. It is election season, and at some point, I do want to regale you with the one thing that everybody in City Hall is in adamant agreement on, all 11 members of the board and the mayor, relative to this March 5th ballot. And I know that you guys have taken this up, and that's Proposition A, relative to a $300 million affordable housing bond that will not raise our property taxes or raise tenants' rent. And that is part of an ongoing set of general obligation bonds to build workforce and lower income housing in the city and county of San Francisco. And as I think everybody at CSFN knows, since 2006, the city has adopted and adhered to a policy wherein we retire as much old debt as we issue new debt. And as a result, I am here to say with a straight face that over the intervening, now getting on to 2 decades, the marginal property tax rate has actually gone down by a smidgen because we've retired a little bit more old debt than we've issued new debt. But what is, I think, very important in the face of a remarkably changed state landscape, which I think everybody here is very aware of, the new dynamic that we live in with the regional housing needs allocation requiring San Francisco to build 82,000 units of housing between now and 2031. And just to put that into perspective, the average number of units that San Francisco has built on an annual basis since World War II has been between 2,000 and 3,000 units. So this is a monumental undertaking. It has led to, you name it, Supervisor Mandelman's fourplex legislation, the mayor and my legislation for converting vacant commercial office downtown to residential. It has led to a drop in the required inclusionary laws as to how much affordable housing developers have to build on site in new development projects. It has led to proposals for upzonings from one side of the city to the other. And it may be in part what is driving a set of state preemptory legislative changes, the most recent of which Charles just mentioned, which is Senate Bill 951, that would take the sliver of private land that is in the coastal zone under the jurisdiction of the Coastal Commission that has been there for 52 years since the enactment of Proposition 20 by the voters in 1972. I am very pleased that the Board of Supervisors, by a supermajority vote, were able to pass a non-binding resolution, binding if it could be, but it can't, urging the state legislature to oppose Senate Bill 951 unless substantially amended. And those amendments that we insisted upon include not taking the sliver of land out by the Great Highway from under Coastal Commission jurisdiction. There is another bill that our own state senator has sponsored on the Senate side. It actually originated on the Assembly side, Assembly Bill 2560, that would take away what's called the savings clause that the Coastal Commission has enjoyed for a half a century, wherein these preemptory bills that are inuring to take away local control have not applied in the coastal zone. This would be an exception to that and would allow bonus density in the coastal zone in the 15 counties of the state of California between the Mexican border and the Oregon border. So that is another one that I will be taking issue with. That is the world that we are living on. I would like to say that the Board of Supervisors is accomplishing a lot of stuff, but in reality, a lot of time is spent fighting rearguard actions that are really taking away local control. The latest iteration of that is a piece of legislation that would remove California Environmental Quality Act analysis for a swath of downtown, south of Market up to Union Square. Anyway, I think you all know the lay of the land, but that is the world that we are living with. Having said that, we are going to have to do what frankly is going to be less with less. We are facing a 2-year creeping up to a $1 billion right now, $842 million deficit that is going to lead to substantial cuts across all departments, and that I promise you, come the last day of July, we will balance painfully on time within the revenue that we expect to see going forward. And that too is the world that we are living in as we are trying to deal with a massively changed world where, just think about this, we have a 3.2% unemployment rate, but a 36%, 19 million square feet of vacant office downtown. The nature of work has changed profoundly. And by the way, that has also obvious impacts to our tax base as it relates to buildings that are being foreclosed on downtown. And while there's a lot of opportunity to recreate a downtown that is more of a neighborhood and is more of a 24/7, doesn't dry up at 6 o'clock on weekdays kind of neighborhood, it is going to come with financial pain. But it also speaks to the way our business tax structure has existed for many decades, that I think is also going to need to be revisited. And I am working with the mayor and the business community to talk about potential tweaks to our fundamental business tax. That shit show that is our nation's capital, down to the bottom of the ticket, all of the odd numbered supervisorial districts, including my own, where I'm termed out, the next mayor of the city and county of San Francisco, city attorney, district attorney, all on the ballot in 258 days from today. And that, I think, is my spotlight speech for the Coalition of San Francisco Neighborhoods. Thank you for keeping the neighborhood movement, beleaguered though it may be, alive and well.
Okay, thank you very much, President Peskin. Before we go to the program with the ballot measures, is there anybody who has a question, just very brief, to ask President Peskin right now?
I followed up on the food insecurity, food security, two programs that I mentioned to you at the last time I actually spoke with you.
Yes, and pumpkins.
That's right, because it's just a lot of wasted food, and I want to continue to do this, but I got no response from the Marin Food Bank after I emailed them, as I emailed you. And of course, I still think my suggestion about using the Unified School District facilities, coming into partnership with them to create more income for the city, is still a viable suggestion. And I wanted to let you know about that. And that's just it.
Yeah, I referred you to, I'm not on the school district board of trustees, and as to your pumpkin recycling idea, I sent you to where I think the best spot is, but I don't work for the Marin San Francisco Food Bank either. But if I hear from those guys, I'll suggest they respond to you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Aaron.
With so much vacancy downtown, and I think as much as 20% vacancies in 36, and then 20% vacancies in Park Merced. Why? I think we need to be filling these units rather than building on new units. That's my thought. What do you think?
So, Glenn, first of all, these are two very different kinds of vacancies. The downtown vacancies are commercial office vacancies, which are systemically very, very different than residential vacancies. But on the residential side, you have a very salient point. And it's funny, I was having this conversation with a company, Mosser Real Estate, last week, who owned thousands of units of residential property in San Francisco, wherein their complaint was that they were in financial trouble because of their very high rate of, although he said 15%, but which is not far from your 20% of residential vacancies in their portfolio, which raises a fundamental question, which is, and I said to him, I was like, I'm being told on the one hand that I'm in the middle of the most acute residential housing crisis in the history of San Francisco and the state of California. And yet there are large property owners who are telling me that they have double-digit vacancy rates. One of these things cannot be true. So, which is to say that, I mean, and part of this is a function of market forces. Part of this is that, you know, if Mosser Real Estate wants to bring their rents down, I suspect they will fill some of these units. And, you know, his point to me is, you know, different geographies have different, you know, occupancy rates and vacancy rates. But it really does call into question this entire narrative that we read about in the Chronicle and that we're being told about from the YIMBYs, that we have, you know, huge, that we have, you know, very low residential vacancy rates. One of these things cannot be true.
So I was wondering what's going to happen about SF Safe and that fiasco. Obviously, due diligence wasn't done on checking references, expenditures. We were, Al and I were on a citywide cab and we noticed extravagant expenditures and stuff. One of the board members she let go tried to tell her board what was going on and nobody paid attention. I guess I know now that she should have gone to the controller or the city attorney. I don't want SF Safe to just like totally disappear. I think they did good work, but things got out of control. And I don't know if it needs another different nonprofit. I don't know what happens, but I don't want it to just disappear. I think they did good things. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, thank you, Mary. Very troubling situation. I think everybody is aware of the, well, now more than allegations and the findings in the controller's financial audit, which, by the way, the financial audit was only for the most recent 9-month period, and there are many unaudited previous years.
Is it? It's just the tip of the iceberg, or what?
Yeah. Right.
What you did.
I asked those exact questions of the police department last Thursday in a hearing at the Government Audit and Oversight Committee as to what their suggestions, what their workout plan going forward is, not only as to the neighborhood engagement services that SF Safe has been traditionally known for since 1976, the bicycle registration services that they've done for the last many years, but also the fact that there are now 195 cameras located in different parts of San Francisco that all feed into their offices at on the 2100 block of Mission Street, and that are cost, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And where is that information going to go? And the answer from the police department is they are trying to figure out what a succession plan is. They did indicate that if they did not get responses that they were seeking from SF Safe's board by, I believe, last Friday at 5 p.m., that they were going to terminate the balance of their grant agreement with SF Safe. My guess, Mary, but you know, this is obviously going to have to be done in collaboration with the department that is the granting agency that has granted SF Safe $5.3 million over the last 5 years, is that they will put out an RFP to obtain similar services from any experienced nonprofit that wants to submit. That's my guess.
Mr. Peskin, if you would like to start, you have 7 minutes.
Thank you, George. I think I can do this in far less than 7 minutes. as I said earlier, the regional housing needs allocation, which which requires that San Francisco build 82,000 units of housing by 2031. According to that state imposed mandate, 46,598 of those units, 57% of them, have to be moderate to low income units. The only way for us to fulfill that mandate is with some amount of subsidy. And while we do our best and have been successful in the past in leveraging state and federal resources, San Franciscans have been very generous in, as you said, although I differ with you just a little bit on the years, and this has been going on since the days that Willie Brown was mayor, through the Newsom administration, into the Ed Lee administration, into the Breed administration, most recently in 2019. Prior to that, in 2015, the voters have voted by 2/3 supermajorities to allow the city and county of San Francisco to issue debt, to leverage those state and federal funds. In this case, it is a $300 million general housing bond obligation authorization, which does not mean that we sell all the bonds at once. We do not. We sell them over time. And as I said earlier, the city policy is to limit the amount of money it borrows only after having retired older debt, and therefore we do not raise the property tax rates when we issue these bonds. This $300 million consists of $240 million to construct, develop, acquire, and rehabilitate new rental housing, $30 million to construct, develop, and acquire existing housing to preserve it as affordable for lower income households and moderate income households, particularly for seniors, and a heretofore missing category, which is $30 million for women experiencing domestic violence and abuse, a category of housing that San Francisco has sadly almost none of. The measure, as I said, is not only sponsored by myself and the mayor, but is sponsored by all 11 members of the Board of Supervisors, the San Francisco Democratic County Central Committee, you name it. You can see in the ballot handbook how widely this is supported. There is one opponent, a gentleman named Larry Marceau, but he does not have organized opposition. There is no organized opposition, and I commend this measure to you, and perhaps my colleague Supervisor Dorsey may want to use the balance of my 7 minutes.
I like finance, so I tried to study it. One of Larry Marceau's big points was that from the 2019 $600 million the city received, they had only spent till recently $300 million, and then they had issued 200 million more just within the last month or two. So that whole tranche, that means there's $100 million left to go. But we will have a catch of several $100 million bonds waiting to be issued. And I was curious your thought process behind this whole thing.
Sure. So, George, and we asked very similar things of the Office of Housing and Community Development as we crafted this bond. The answer is that there are $890 million of entitled affordable housing units in the pipeline, far more than the recent tranche of authorization that the city issued, far more than the $100 million balance in the 2019 bond, and far more than the $300 million that this bond contemplates. And I mean, what we do is we have a number of identified sites. We have gotten those properties entitled for construction. They go through the process of 30% working drawings, 70% working drawings, 100% working drawings, go out to RFPs. All of this takes time. But the bottom line is the last $100 million has been identified for what it is going to be spent on. And there is far more need and far more projects in the pipeline than this $300 million is going to address. I would have made this bond larger. The only reason I didn't was because we have to live within the self-imposed constraint of not issuing any more debt than we retire. And three, knowing that we have a bond schedule in our capital plan for fire, station redos, for park redos, we had to limit this at that amount. I would have loved for it to be larger, but in order to make sure that we are issuing as much debt as we are retiring old debt, that was as much as we could put on this thing without raising property tax rates.
In 2019, I was part of the Mayor's Housing Committee, and there was actually a $300 million bond. And suddenly Ben Rosenfeld came up with an extra $300 million. I talked to him about it, and it seems like the city has to stay at a 3% value limit of their bonding. And the city was actually reassessed in value. So the city all of a sudden became worth more so they could borrow. And that money went to housing, which is, I think, a great thing. It was kind of prescient, actually, in terms of what was going to happen. No,
George, we do have another question.
And I'm happy to address that one, just so that we are clear. Number one, we are far below our 3% limit. We have been for many, many years, and the declining value of some downtown real estate does not change that. Number two, the capital plan is a living document, and to the extent that one increases the size of a bond in, say, 2019, what that means is you're basically reducing borrowing capacity from future bonds. That is a policy decision, but the reality is we continue to live within our self-imposed constraint. And indeed, our historic 0.12% property tax rate has come down to 0.118 something, but our property tax rates have actually gone down in the last 17 years.
Thank you.
Okay, we have another question.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Mary Eliza?
Okay, thanks. I have a quickie here, or two really quickies. One is, what happens if the bill does not pass? Does that mean we can put out a bigger bond later if it doesn't pass this time? The other question is, does this include shelters as well as permanent housing facilities?
So this does not include shelters. Answer to your first question is that if this does not pass, we obviously won't be building $300 million worth of affordable housing. And yes, that bond capacity could be carried forward.
Okay.
Okay, and we have Jean Barish.
Thank you. I also have two questions. One is, do you know how many units these $300 million will build, number one? And number two, is there a definition of affordable housing? Because I know that it ranges from, way low to middle income, and I just wondered if that had been defined.
Yes, so all of these words, moderate, low, very low, and extremely low, actually have percentage of area median income definitions at 120% of AMI, 80% of AMI, 60% of AMI, and 40% of AMI. And this is for all of the above.
Do you know how that pie is going to be sliced?
It does not say how it is going to be sliced. The reality is it is a function of the different, and what we try to do is we try to do it across the board even. But in recent years, there has been more emphasis on moderate rate, the missing middle. And I think this administration is moving more in that direction. And what was your second question, Jean?
Do you know how many units this will enable the
Yes,
city to
so
build?
all of this, of course, is a function of what federal and state dollars, what tax credits we are able to leverage. But according to the controller, it will build a minimum of 1,502 affordable homes, which is housing for approximately 5,000 people.
Thank you.
Okay, George, we have another question. Deborah Murphy?
When you say 80% of the median, what does that mean? Is it people making 50,000 a year, people making 100,000 a year?
Interestingly enough, area median income just conveniently happens to be about $100,000, which is a lot of money for a single individual. So 80% of AMI is $80,000 a year, 60% of AMI is $60,000 a year, 120% of AMI is $120,000 a year. That is workforce housing in the city that we live in. Now, mind you, our AMI calculations are a little screwed up, and we tried to fix this, but it is very difficult to fix. And the reason is the federal numbers include Marin and San Mateo County, where there are averages that are wealthier than us. But $100,000 for a single individual is area median income, and that's what we use.
Okay,
So how many of these units will be for people who make less than 50,000 a year? To me, that's low income.
So the answer to that in rough numbers, let me just do that in my head. That would be very low. I'm doing a rough cut of 1,500 divided by 4, about 400 units.
It is hard with AMI from Marin through San Mateo, especially in areas where we don't have as much money. Am I correct in I read the mayor's housing legislation, which is quite a read, and she changed the AMI to 1.2, which allowed like a family of 4 at $108,000, $12,000 to go to 174 for early responders, nurses, police. Is that, am I wrong, or is that, or am I correct?
I don't have the numbers at my fingertips, but I can tell you this, George, there has been an ongoing policy tension over the last several years as Breed and the mayor's administration argue on moving what we call affordable housing up to 140% of AMI, and others, including myself, who believe that we should do more on the 120, 100%, 80% of AMI. It is an ongoing policy dynamic that plays out day in and day out. And if you, matter of fact, going back to Wiener's legislation to remove CEQA for a swath of the city in District 6 and District 3, that actually gave some relief up to 140% of AMI.
Thank you very much.